another FS Club Esop Center webinar. It's a delight to have you on board today. My name is Michael Mainelli. I'm the Executive Chairman of the CN Group, and it's my privilege to be able to run these webinars. Today's particularly exciting. We're going to try the sofa format. The team were here in their green room joking about whether or not this was doing danger to Graham Norton's reputation on his talk show, but we'll see how it goes. After I get out of your way, Darren Smith is going to chat with our guests, and he'll introduce his guests on his red sofa. We've got time for a few concluding remarks, and then we're going to get on to questions from the audience. We've already had a few questions emailed to us, but please use your GoToWebinar facility to send questions through, and Darren and I will field them to our excellent panel. Just before we get cracking, I need to give some enormous thanks to our sponsors. We have a raft of sponsors here, as you can see, and what is wonderful about them is how they let us range widely and freely across everything to do with financial services and technology. And today, of course, we have the joy, not just the employee share option schemes that we all know about, but also about how they're administered and run. At this point, I'm going to hand you over to our host of hosts, our compere, the man of the moment who owns the red sofa, Darren Smith. Darren, the sofa is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, apologies first of all that I'm not on screen, everyone. I've definitely got a face for radio, so I'm going to try interview the guys on the sofa, and you can see the beautiful faces on screen now. If we could just go on to the next slide, what I'd like to do is introduce you to them and get cracking. I know we've got 20 minutes. There's lots of questions that have come in already, which I'm delighted to see. Any that we can't get through, we will answer. We'll come back to you on emails, or we can give you a call as well. So, I'm Darren Smith. I'm from YBS Share Plans. I'm the Corporate Relationship Manager. But I'd like to introduce you to Bryony Padgett-Jones, who is one of my colleagues, who's a Business Development Manager for YBS Share Plans. We've got Ross Crick, a manager at Crick. He can answer any questions around trust issues or anything like that. I've got a counsel in for trust issues, but apparently Ross is your man for all trust-related questions today. Apparently they're slightly different. We've also got Emma Parker, Managing Associate at Tapestry Compliance, who can answer any burning legal questions as well. So without further ado, I'd like to go straight in and ask the first question. Nice hard-hitting one for you, Emma. I'm going to go for you first. So, given the impact of the pandemic across so many aspects of our lives, share prices are dropping, job retention schemes, mass redundancies, and the fact we are facing a global recession, is this the end of equity-based share plans?
Thank you for that question, Darren. And I would say, absolutely, this is not the end for equity-based share plans. I do think it's fair to say that employee share plans, equity-based share plans, have been put on the table by many companies as one of the areas they're thinking about how and where and whether they cut costs. It's one piece of the overall picture, and share plans do form part of that bigger conversation. Cash is king at the moment, as we all know. But it's not the end for equity-based share plans, because actually there are opportunities for equity to thrive and share plans to become more vital to companies than ever before. Firstly, there's still a need to incentivise people, perhaps more than ever. Generally speaking, equity is cheaper than cash, particularly if you're using new leadership shares. And for small and startup companies that may be struggling with cash flow, offering, for example, EMI options in this environment is going to be an attractive prospect to get that real skill and talent into your workforce to see you through this pandemic and to retain and motivate them as well. Secondly, equity offers a much bigger opportunity and tool for reward. As we all know, one of the great things about employee share plans is that the value of a share tracks the value of a company. So all companies are hoping to look to the longer term and driving things back to normality. And performance-related pay is an important aspect of that, I think. So companies have a real opportunity here to utilise that aspect in pay, particularly for more senior employees. thirdly, in the context of all employee plans, we're seeing companies look at these plans as a unifier. Companies are recognising that stopping or deferring these plans doesn't look great optically at this time and might send a negative message, particularly at a point when you're trying to rally your staff and get them on board and say we can get through this together. And one of the primary purposes of employee share ownership is employee engagement. And through share ownership, employees become far more interested and engaged in the success of the company, which I know is what we're all wanting at this point.
Brilliant. And I'm delighted you said that, because that means still got a job, which is great. So we're all passionate about equity-based share plans. So thanks for that. I'll move on to Ross now. So through the COVID-19 crisis, as a trustee, are you still seeing new EBTs being set up, or other indications companies are still investing in their share plans?
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, we are still seeing some new EBTs being set up. We've recently established 3 for private companies, mainly for share warehousing market purposes. PLCs have been on a bit more of the quiet side because they're looking at other areas of their business first, before considering taking the funds to set up an EBT to satisfy share plans. I mean, it can depend on the company's business itself as well. As one of our current EBTs has been wound down because the company's in financial difficulties, whereas for one of our other new EBTs, the company actually manufactures PPE equipment, so that means their business is booming. So as ever in these extraordinary times, such as during the COVID pandemic, there are inevitably winners and losers. One thing we're hearing in the market is that companies are looking at moving their trust to new providers, even during these times, because they cut costs when in some cases they're not quite happy with service levels. We actually heard that from another trustee on a different webinar a couple of weeks ago. We at VG, we offer a transfer in for clients looking to transfer their trust on a free basis, because we understand that the company has to pay exiting trustee costs, and so we try to help them bear some of that initial cost. We actually feel that this is an opportune time for companies to look at their EBT's headline costs to see if it's worth moving. As an independent trust company, we've got the ability to keep our costs low whilst maintaining that personalised service that companies like to have.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, you're so right that every company's in a different boat. My brother works for Johnson & Johnson, so his company are obviously got a lot on at the moment, but he works in trauma. So because the pub's that open, he's not dealing with a lot of drunken falls and things like that. So actually his business, he's not busy. But then as a company they are, and, there's lots of different scenarios as well. So thanks for that, Ross. If we move on to Bryony, similar question to yourself, are companies still offering all employee share plans? And what changes are you seeing?
They are indeed, Darren, yes. So we are still seeing companies offer both share safe and SIP. However, as to be expected, there have been a slight air of uncertainty around the types of plans that companies have been offering and whether companies wish to offer as they may have originally expected. What we saw in March and April was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of companies not quite sure what the right thing to do was. Should they be launching ShareSafe? Should they be launching SIPs? And ultimately what we saw on the back of that was that a few of the invitations that we had kind of in plan for this year were either postponed or cancelled. Now we're talking relatively small numbers in the grand scheme of things. We had 13 ShareSafe invitations postponed, and they've been postponed until later on in the year, on the back of kind of September results is what we're seeing in trend at the moment. So a lot of companies were just holding out to see what the market did and gain a little bit more confidence in what was going on. And we had a total of 9 ShareSafe invitations cancelled. It's important to draw out there that they weren't all cancelled due to COVID-related issues. Some things came up unexpectedly, such as company takeovers or companies deciding against offering for other reasons, such as maybe previously poor take-up or costs, as Ross touched on as well. With regard to share incentive plans, we haven't seen many changes at all with regards to the number of share incentive plans being launched. Partnership and matching shares continue as normal. The only change that we have seen is one of our clients chose to pause their share incentive plan, which is quite a drastic step to take and not necessarily one that we may recommend, but they felt it was the right thing to do for their workforce, and that was due to the majority of their workforce being on furlough, and ultimately they didn't want participants to be disadvantaged with the matching share ratio which they awarded shares on. We have seen an increased number of SIP lump sum contributions, which we do tend to see around this time of year anyway, with it being a new tax year. However, they are increased in line with what we would usually see. So that's showing us that participants are taking advantage of potentially record low share prices. What's really promising is that throughout all of this, we have remained consistent in terms of having conversations with companies that are looking to launch share save or SIP, so where they don't currently offer any form of all-employee plans. And we have, very much like Ross, also still been having conversations with companies who are potentially looking to move from other providers. And overall, at this moment in time, I would say that we're starting to see a little bit more confidence now being regained. We've not seen much impact in share save or SIP plans that are due for June, July, August. They do very much seem to be continuing as normal. So that reassurance definitely does now seem to be there a little bit more than what may have been in March and April when things were still very much up in the air.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And in terms of individuals on a share save, are you seeing mass closures, that people wanting the money out or payment break?
No, we aren't actually. Looking at the statistics, the figures that we had forecasted have been under-delivered essentially. So we had forecasted slightly higher turnout of cancellations and people requesting refunds of their savings, and we've been relatively surprised that actually that isn't the case. And that's really positive to see, because ultimately share save and SIP should be seen as a long-term investment, and rational decisions shouldn't be made kind of off the cuff with regards to options lapsing if you request a refund of savings. So it's really good to see that actually people are holding out and hopefully remaining positive and optimistic that share prices will increase, and when it comes to their share save maturity, it will be above water for them to exercise their share options. Brilliant.
Thanks for that, Bryony. I think that leads on to Emma then. One of the questions we've been asked a number of times is, can employees on furlough join share schemes? Can they make contributions to SIP and share safe whilst on furlough, change the payments, etc.?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think just to add to Bryony's question and her answer on that, one thing I'm seeing the same as Bryony in terms of the legal side of things, but one thing I'm seeing as well is companies come to us and say, how do we restructure our new offer in a way that saves costs? So, for example, under a share save, as you said, Bryony, going ahead with launching on the usual timetable, but perhaps imposing a limit on the number of shares available to control dilution issues, for example. So, absolutely seeing the same as you on there, and there's things that you can do to make sure you control those costs ahead. Just to go to your question, Darren, can employees on furlough join new SIP and share save offers? The answer is yes. Employees who are furloughed remain employees. And so for SIP and share save, if they meet other eligibility criteria like the qualifying period, then they remain eligible. And in fact, you'll have to invite them if they meet the mandatory criteria. There could be communication issues because it may be those furloughed employees don't have access to their work email address anymore, or they may not actually be in the office, so you can't give them things in the office. So you just have to work with your administrators to ensure that you do still give them the opportunity to participate on the same similar terms, and you'll also need to address your communication with them, perhaps sending things by post. In terms of employees that are furloughed, what are their choices? That depends on the type of plan. So for a share save, they remain an employee, and they are, if they're continued to be paid through payroll, then they can be contributing in the plan. As Bryony mentioned, if they want to withdraw their savings and lapse the option, they can do so. In terms of their other choices, they can take a savings holiday of up to 12 months. That does push back their option maturity date, and they do have to make up those missed months. But that could be really useful to participants where cash is tight at the moment and they don't want to lose that valuable option, but they do want to pause their payments. In terms of if they're on unpaid leave, unfortunately, HMRC do not currently expressly allow them to make payments by standing order. They do for certain circumstances like those on sick leave or on maternity leave, but there isn't currently an exception explicitly for COVID-19, and there is lobbying going on to HMRC about this at the moment. The SIP offers of partnership shares and matching shares, again, they're being paid through payroll, so they can keep contributing, but just watch out for their contribution level. Make sure they remain within the limit, the lower of 1,800 or 10% of salary for partnership shares. This is particularly an issue if perhaps they were part-time and they've been furloughed on 80% of salary and they're not on a particularly high pay rate. That could trip them over. So you'll be monitoring participants' contributions there to make sure they don't over-contribute. And obviously they can suspend their contributions as well.
Brilliant. I think something to link to what you and Brian just spoke about on the latest news pad. I don't know if you saw the article. It was talking about senior members looking into seeking an immediate change to the share save regulations in order to help schemes where benefit share option prices underwater, because there's a lot of underwater plans, and they're looking, if they can get the HMRC to change to more like the American way, so it can be taken an 80% of the market price a month before maturity. What's your view on that, Emma?
Yeah, so I saw that's really interesting and a really innovative idea. As you say, Darren, it's kind of mirroring the US tax-advantaged ESPP model, where you can take the discounted value of a share at either the beginning or the end of the offering period. I do think that would be incredibly useful to ShareSafe participants. But with that said, at the moment, ShareSafe is actually risk-free. Ultimately, if the share price drops, they can take their money back. Obviously, they can't go ahead with the purchase at the discounted price. I think it's an innovative idea. It would be interesting to see if HMRC would allow that, and if they did, would it only ever be prospective rather than retrospective options which have already been granted? You'd also have to think about accounting as well. I'm absolutely not an accountant, but I do know that where you don't have a fixed value at the beginning, that can have issues.
Brilliant. That's great. I wish we could use risk-free in our documentation, Emma. I love how you go with that.
Yeah, no, obviously. Think about not giving investment advice, but effectively they can always get the money back. So that's one, added benefit of ShareSafe at this time.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. Okay, then we'll move back to Ross. Are you seeing any up-and-coming industries establishing incentive arrangements for their employees?
Yeah, I think as the world gravitates towards automation, we feel that tech in general, and particularly fintech, is a burgeoning industry, and as such is potentially a bit of an untapped market. We've seen more and more advisors create some form of tech offering and package to those kind of companies, which ordinarily involves some form of discount on fees at the outset, because most fintech companies, startups, don't have the capital to spend initially. So a lot of these companies should really have some kind of incentivization plan in place, which could be linked to a potential buyout or IPO. And as trustees, we're looking at taking on these types of trusts for free, in some cases on the basis that we get remunerated at a later date, and on the basis that the company does do well in the future. Obviously, with that though, some might not make it, and we might not get paid, but it'd be the same as the advisors. So, you're then invested in the company as a trustee as well. We're really passionate about tech. I'm really interested in this space, and we think it could be a good niche market. We have a tech transformation team at BG who are trying to automate and streamline our processes and trustees. So we could be a good fit for those types of businesses. But where we're definitely not looking to build any shared plan admin platforms where we're just trying to automate our trustee processes. But yeah, we really think that there could be some scope for fintech firms to put plans in place.
That's really useful. And one of the questions, I host quite a few of these, and one of the questions I often get is, what tech can we use to speed things up, to cut down on costs, etc. So no, it is good to see that that's where you're going with that. Which leads me on to Bryony as well, because at this moment in time, budgets are tightening. I know that me and Bryony have to cost save on certain things. We now have to take a mega bus rather than train travel. Well, I'd love to travel, to be honest, at this moment in time. So no, on a serious note, your budgets are tightening in the current environment. What top tips would you give to reduce costs on employee engagement? Because we still want people to be able to join these plans, but obviously there might not be the budget there for it. And what support can you give on financial wellbeing as well?
Lovely, thank you, Darren. I think it's self-explanatory to say to use low-cost methods of communication. So we very much think email is the way forward. It's really cost-effective and it's very good at targeting a whole workforce. We know it's not often ideal if all employees don't have work email addresses, but we are seeing that more and more companies do hold personal email addresses, whether that be for the purposes of pay slips or just to share important updates, especially in this environment now where Emma mentioned that people aren't necessarily accessing work emails. And so we have seen more and more companies recently holding personal email addresses. So we would say, where possible, if it's generic information that can be shared in a secure method or without needing to be sent in a secure method, email is definitely the way forward. I would also say creating really high quality, easy to read, accessible communication is key. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be all singing, all dancing. Sometimes the key is getting a message delivered to the target audience quickly and accessibly. And I know that Emma and Tapestry have also been helping their clients with COVID share, save and sit frequently asked questions, and that's something that we've also been supporting our clients with as well. And the way in which we pull that together is in a very generic type format so that can be shared with all our clients and ultimately all of our share, save and sit participants. It's extremely cost effective because there's not necessarily any branding that's being done or there's no creative team behind it. It really is about getting a clear, concise message out there and ultimately answering your employees' questions, especially in such an uncertain time. So I would say discuss your communication needs with your share plan administrator. They should be able to support. It may be that they have different levels of assistance that they can provide to you in terms of what documentation they can support with, but they should definitely be able to work with your costs and deliver really strong communication in line with budgets. Moving on to the second part of the question, Darren, around financial wellbeing in the current environment, it's clear that there's no time like now to be supporting employees with not only their financial wellbeing, but also their physical and mental wellbeing too. We know that financial wellbeing can often be a slightly taboo subject, something that maybe companies see as not necessarily their responsibility, or maybe something that they don't want to get involved in. It's a touchy subject, speaking about money sometimes. But we do know that now more than ever, it's really important that your employees feel supported by their employer. And I think it's also important to draw out that although your employees may not directly be impacted through the company that they work for instance, you may not have placed anybody on furlough, or you may not have made any redundancies, that does not mean that your employees aren't impacted in a wider sense. Their partner may have been on furlough, their partner may have been made redundant, hours may have been cut. So I think it's important to be aware of what's going on outside of your business that may impact your employees. And I think ultimately it comes down to understanding the repercussions that low financial wellbeing or low financial education have on performance, engagement and overall productivity. Something that us at YBS Share Plans are really happy to announce and pleased to be able to share with you today is that we have teamed up with Second Sight to provide a financial wellbeing hub which is free of charge until the end of August. Now it is titled a financial wellbeing hub, but it does provide broader information on both physical and emotional and mental wellbeing, with the information and content provided by Right Steps and Second Sight. Now there's absolutely no frills attached to that, there's no catch, it really is free of charge until the end of August. So if anyone is interested in hearing more information about that and how that may be able to support your employees, please don't hesitate to contact either myself or Darren via email or through LinkedIn. We'll be happy to answer any other questions or potentially show you what that functionality looks like.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, that's our 20 minutes. So I think well done to you three guys for staying on track there. Hopefully got lots of questions. But I've got some more in the tank, if not for the last 15 minutes. But Michael, go on, get them up and then we'll go to from the audience.
Well, actually, that's a great timing there, Darren. I was wondering, we had a couple of emailed questions. Maybe you could bring a couple of those in to start with.
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, thanks to Ian McWilliam for the question. We have got a question on EMIs, which we're going to just look into for you, and I'll be back to you on that one. But what I can do is I'll go to Bryony with this one. This one is, given coronavirus lockdown, many small businesses' profits will have been affected, so their share valuation is expected to be low this year. If share options are a value that is now lower than their exercise price, so underwater, they will not want to exercise the options this year, even though that would be the normal time to do so. Would the panel A cancel the options and issue new ones, thereby perhaps postponing gains for 3 years, or B just leave the options to be exercised once the value has risen again? So I think you can probably speak from an all-employee plan, and then we can go into exec plans later.
Yes, most definitely. So I think it is key to draw out that the answer I'll share is on all employee plans, so specifically looking at ShareSave and what we've been seeing from an administrator's perspective. For the majority of underwater options, there have been no changes to the way in which those options mature, so have not been withdrawn or cancelled and further options awarded. They have been allowed to mature with the hope that the 6-month exercise window will allow the share price to re-stabilise and allow participants to exercise their options within that 6-month window, with the options being above water. So that's what we've seen from an administrator's perspective.
And is there anyone on the panel who can talk from an exec plan side there? Anyone like that, anything?
I think it's one of those questions that would be really good to kind of have a chat with the person that raised it, because we probably need a little bit more detail to drill down into exactly what is the best in their specific circumstances. What I would say is it's difficult to forecast at the moment how share prices will move. So, you could re-grant now at the market value now because the share price has dropped significantly, but who knows how and when it will recover again. And most options have a 10-year life. So hanging on and waiting to see how it moves wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. That's kind of my initial thoughts on that, but we can follow up offline into the specific details.
Yeah, I had a question from an advisor myself where they had a company who basically wanted to stop midway through an invite. This is again all employee, stop halfway through an invite, and then do another invitation because the share price had plummeted so much. Now they're asking my advice on that, and our advice was, well, what happens if you launch again and in 2 weeks the share price has gone down again? So it's kind of a tough one. It's I think if I knew the answer, I'd be a multimillionaire. So I'll be playing the market definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michael, have you got any more questions that people have thrown in, or shall I ask them?
Well, yeah, keep going on the list that you've got, and I'll come in towards the end. There's a lot of political ones. Go ahead, Darren.
Okay, no problem at all. Okay, so Emma, when will the lockdown end? No, we'll step back from that one. So, next question. Emma, is there anything that companies should be looking to change in their plan rules as a consequence of COVID-19?
Yes, there is. So exactly what you should do depends on the type of plan. So looking from a listed company perspective on the executive plan side, companies should be stress testing their plan rules on a number of points. So for the December year-end companies, unfortunately, they've felt this really quite recently because their grant window fell right at the time that share prices dropped across the FTSE 250 as a consequence of the pandemic. So they've kind of looked at this issue earlier than some others. But what you should be doing is checking the ability you have to average the share price over a longer period in your plan rules for the purposes of things like plan widths and award sizes. Some might say your award size is 150% of salary. Well, 6 months ago, that would have got you X number of shares, and that number will now get you 3 or 4 times that. So that's caused, significant concern with investors, with the Investment Association, in particular worrying about windfall gains due to share price fluctuations. So what we're seeing companies do now is look in their LTIPs and see what discretions do we have here. In the event that there is a windfall gain, are we going to be able to reduce the level of vesting to align with the shareholder experience? And I think that this has been supported by the Investment Association's recent guidance. And you should be having conversations with your advisors about what kinds of discretion you want in your other executive plans, such as your third share bonus plans, because there is a debate to be had there. Those plans are often considered more to have been earned by the individual. And so whacking broad discretions in those plans can be perceived as unfair. It's definitely a conversation to be had. On the all-employee plan side, Brian and I touched on this a little bit, but a lot of companies are looking at revisiting the structure of any new offers. Can we reduce our monthly savings limit? Can we impose a cap on the number of shares available? Most of the time, you'll have the flexibility to do that already in your plan rules, but you do just need to check that. Work with your administrator, work with your advisor. How are we going to run our next offer, and can we do that under the plan rules? For all types of plan, just a kind of housekeeping point from a legal perspective, double check what displays law points. They're not always positive, but in the unfortunate position where you do need to withdraw a plan or stop offering it, those provisions try to reduce acquired rights risks in local jurisdictions, disclaim claims in the event of termination of employment. They're not always effective, but you do want them in there in the unfortunate event that you do have to look at what your choices are as a consequence of the virus.
And can you see any wacky new plans being designed off the back of it? Do you think there's anything coming down the line?
Do you know what? I've had a very similar experience to Bryony about a surprising number of queries about new share saves and SIPs, and also global plans. People are looking at the structure of what they want to offer now because, as I say, there is an increased need to incentivize people to get you through the pandemic, and equity is often a cheap way to achieve that. You want to restructure it to match the particular model that you have. So, we can talk about how with a share save, I know we shouldn't use the phrase risk-free, but it does couch the participant that they can take the savings back. Whereas with a SIP, there's less of a cushion depending on the level of your match. I do think companies will be looking at this as a tool for engagement with employees, and when cash is tight, introducing more reliance on equity to get them through it. And actually another trend that I've seen is companies thinking about swapping salary and bonus for shares. In fact, I think this was in the recent, in that Esop newspad that we looked at, that the Daily Mail has done that and said, look, take a pay cut of, I think, between 1% and 26% in return for some shares. because companies want to keep that cash flow.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Okay, Ross then. What more recent changes have you seen companies make to their EBT arrangement, and what are you looking at for the months ahead? What are you doing for the future?
We haven't seen too many changes on our own portfolio of EBTs, but obviously on a slightly negative point, we've had a couple of clients who put their monthly market purchases arrangements on hold. And as Emma said, it's because they're dealing with their cash flows at the moment, so they've got other things to deal with. But it is a juxtaposition for companies, because ordinarily a company's share price is likely to be lower now, which would obviously make purchases more attractive if they're trying to hedge as well. But because companies need to ensure they've got those sufficient cash flows to operate, then a couple of other companies have had to make the decision to actually put those on pause and retain the cash, because they've probably got other things they need to use the cash for. But I mean, even those companies who do their prices, the shares themselves will probably have to be tweaked and incorporate sufficient discretion to amend the vesting criteria, and that's to mitigate huge windfalls, as Emma said earlier, that could be made in the future. Much as everyone would love to make you do kind of have to mitigate against all companies do. But obviously, we want to try and retain and incentivize employees. I think most companies are looking at how the current situation is affecting share plans in place, and whether anything needs to be updated or can in fact be updated in relation to the share plans themselves. So, we'd always recommend to speak to their advisors to see if they need to make any tweaks or put any new plans in place.
Darren, Stuart Bailey's made two comments. One I posted that referring to the savings SAYE underwater bit, but another easier method to help SAYE would be to extend the vesting period at the end of the savings contract to allow markets to recover. And he's just kicked in on this to point out that he's aware that some cash-rich companies have used the opportunity to overhedge to take advantage of the market, which is an interesting point as well. There's two broad areas the audience seem to want to know about in the time that we've got available, Darren. One, let's face up to it, is basically bankruptcy. The anticipation a lot of firms are going to go down. What does bankruptcy pose for schemes? What should both providers and employees be thinking about?
Who'd like to say that one?
I think from a trustee's perspective, obviously the EBT set up to the benefit of the employees. If we have assets in the trust, usually shares, then it's likely those shares are worthless. So usually there's a formal process that we need to go through as trustees to wind that down. But it's quite a simple path for us. It's obviously very sad when companies become bankrupt, but if there's no value in it, then there's fairly standard processes we have as trustees to wind that down.
Sorry, Brian, go for it.
I was going to say the same would apply from a SIP trust perspective in terms of the fact that we would presume the shares would be worthless, so SIP participants would be directly impacted by the bankruptcy, and we would make sure that the trust was dealt with in the right way. With regards to ShareSave, we've already touched upon the fact that ShareSave is more risk-free, and ultimately participants would be able to withdraw the savings in their plan with very little impact to the ShareSave plan directly. Two slightly different aspects depending on which plan you may offer internally.
And I was just going to add, from a legal point of view, obviously we've talked here about bankruptcy from the company perspective, but a sad consequence of this crisis is that we may see individual participants in your share plans also facing financial difficulties. Almost all UK companies will have, hopefully, in their plan rules a provision which provides their share award lapses in the event of bankruptcy. That's kind of what you would normally provide. Obviously, that's the ideal position practically, because it's just a nightmare to try and work initiatively with getting that share money out to the person who's appointed to deal with that bankruptcy. So that's just a housekeeping point really, to make sure that your plan rules do protect the company from the admin nightmare of that happening.
I was going to say, perspective, you know, in the event that the trust actually has a lot of cash in there, you know, it is there for the benefit of the beneficiaries, i.e. usually the employees of the company. So if the company's bankrupt, we could be selling a pot of cash, but that would be still for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So I haven't actually been in that position yet, but potentially that money would be there to benefit employees still. So that's part of the reason for a trust, that it's protected for those employees. So whilst the company might not exist any longer, we still potentially could have some worthwhile assets that we could distribute to the employees.
This is where something really really important with the financial wellbeing. So if there's financial education in place and wellbeing, it hopefully teach people not to have their eggs all in one basket, especially with the share incentive plan, for example. If their only shares are in their own company and something happens to that company, it's very risky. So that's where, you know, if people do start growing the wealth, that's where they do need financial advice and education, and that's where the wellbeing people can help as well. Go ahead.
No, yeah, we've probably just got time for 3 more, so I'll kick it in quickly. Here's point one for you all. How is the lower base rate likely to impact on the administration fees charged by SAYE providers?
Okay, I think that's probably a question for myself. So we know that the base rates are probably at a record low at the moment, or especially compared to what we've seen over recent months. I can only speak for ourselves in terms of we try and make sure that the pricing implications are very minimal to our clients. The base rate is out of our clients' control, and we will still make sure that we are charging competitively and, like I said, not passing too much of that charge on to our clients. That's really all I can say on that matter, I think, unless, Darren, you've got anything you wish to add.
Yeah, I'd just say we'd work with the company as well to, you know, where we can save on costs. So with your, you know, engagement on a launch, you know, what else can we do to bring those costs down and to really support the company, and go that way. And also, can we help them once they do go back up? Can we cater that in for now to help them?
Emma, I think this one's for you. This is from Peter Lemaistre. Tapestry do a lot of industry analysis. Do you intend to carry out research post-COVID and or expect to see post-COVID any significant evidence that employee-owned businesses or those with a culture of equity incentivization will be shown to be more resilient and robust during times of uncertainty? And if any momentum of the industry can be gained from this, or if it will change the industry. I might point out, by the way, that Fred Hackworth, who is the editor of Newspad, is on this webinar as well, and I know he's quite interested, as are we at Siena, in such research too. But Emma, your call there.
Fabulous, brilliant question, and I think, you know, that's a question that we could probably talk for a long time about. So I think you're absolutely right. We do industry research, and we will be, I believe, doing a review of the FTSE 100 in terms of the impact that we're seeing in the recent AGM season. And as we do that, you know, each year we look at what research we carry out, and I'm sure that post-COVID we'll see an impact there in terms of what are companies doing at the executive share plan level. I absolutely agree that I think we will see evidence that employee-owned businesses or employees with a significant level of equity given to employees will show increased incentivization, increased resilience, and that's something that we're working on with our clients in terms of roundtables and delivering webinars where we find virtual polls, and we really find that through engaging with our employees, we see that through our clients, we see that positive research. So watch the space.
And a final point, and Darren, I'll hand back to you after this. It's tough. I'm trying to summarize a lot of issues here, but it would seem, and I'm summarizing a whole host of questions from the audience, that what they'd be most keen on is a comment from each of the three of you, and you, Darren, perhaps at the end, on what one thing would you suggest to the government ought to be done for employee share option schemes that might actually help the country economically through the crisis?
Should we start with you, Ross? You're on the left of my screen. Gives me a bit more time to think about it.
I guess they need to put things in place to make it more attractive for employees to obviously to get more involved, to be more engaged. You know, whether there are more tax breaks or increased kind of limits, free limits to plough more money in and to gain more shares. You know, I think it's about making it more attractive, but clearly the government are in a black hole at the moment, so they're probably going to look to potentially raise tax rates. I don't know, we might see or start to see that hybrid style Esops with a PSP edition make a bit of a comeback that used to be de rigueur in the past. So it is hard to second guess the government. I think Rishi's got quite a difficult task on his hands, but they are going to have to try and fill that hole. But I do think that they need to try and make it attractive for employees to to have a stake in their businesses and incentivise them, because that could get the economy going again.
Okay, and Emma?
So there are so many things I'd like to ask the government for at the moment, but if I had to say just one, I think one that jumps out at me is a reduced holding period on the SIP, reducing from 5 years to 3 at most, because I do feel that, you know, in this post-COVID world, what are we going to see with employees moving from employer to employer? Perhaps that will be another potential change. And at the moment, what we want is to try and encourage companies to use equity. We want that engagement. We want that incentivization to be given to employees in a tax efficient way. And that 5-year holding period is looking very outdated.
And I think that will, one of the questions earlier, Michael, was about bankruptcy. That might wreck people's confidence on share intensive funds. People investing in the future. So bringing that year down to 3 years, maybe not as long a timescale for them to think about. So, Emma, you stole mine there as well. I was going to go for that.
Sorry, Darren.
So I'll let
Great minds.
Bryony, have you got anything you can add there, Bryony?
There's a point probably on share save that I can mention. So as Emma said, there are lots of things that I think probably could be done with both share save and SIP. But from a share save perspective, it would be good to see a little bit more flexibility potentially on where funds can come from. So what I'm referring to is participants being able to make payments via standing order, in addition to those that are usually allowed to pay by standing order. So at the moment, even though employees can defer for up to 12 payments, some participants are worried about the knock-on impact then with a delayed maturity and the ability to then enter new savings contracts, as well then with headroom issues. So I think there may be a possibility to allow participants to either set up standing orders to make the scheme a little bit more flexible, or maybe even make a lump sum contribution at the end of the savings contract to catch up on any missed payments to then ultimately prevent a deferred maturity date. That would be something I would like to see to add a bit more flexibility.
I think that's a fabulous idea, because that would help with people's financial well-being as well. If they've got money in an account that they want to use, but they're not getting paid, or they need to use that, then that would definitely support them and help them. A great idea. Michael?
Well, Darren, thank you so much for that. I'm sorry to kind of pull the leg off your sofa. I'm afraid we we've got to call it quits here. We're a little over time as it is, but it's been fantastic. Really good suggestions, great panel, well done. Just in closing, if I might, don't forget that there are a lot of resources online. One of the great things about these things, we know it's online, and so Darren hasn't been reading out biographies or anything. Go check it out online, see what's there. Not least Newspad, which was referred to there, and Fred is looking for other ideas and suggestions. There's also a wider scheme here looking at both the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal 10, reduced inequalities, and also an employee share ownership bulletin. Again, free. This is not about trying to get you to join the Esop Center, although that's always open to you. I must take this opportunity again before I get to the panel to thank our sponsors who make it all possible. Really, they are very tolerant, and I think the tolerance has paid off big dividends today in a wide-ranging and great discussion. And finally, again, online, you can see a whole host of webinars. Fascinating one tomorrow with Victoria Ward and her colleague Caitlin. They're going to be looking at beyond being remotely human. They've done some actual deep research into workplaces and workplaces design, and it spans the COVID incident. So they're going to be looking at the way we'll all be working in the future, and you can see the other webinars coming up next week. But it remains for me to thank, if I may, Darren, you for chairing in such a magnificent way, and all the prep you put into this to help make it work, and to your three panelists, Emma, Ross, and Bryony. And I'm afraid all I can offer you is a virtual applause, so I will do it if I may. And thank all of you for your work today. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Astonishing. Over 70 people online. Great conversation, great inputs. Thank you so much. And for those of you who'd like to share this with friends who couldn't make it, it will be posted in about 48 hours.